So this is basically how I renovated my garden and turned it from a mud pit that's basically been left to be overgrown with trees everywhere to turning it into like a nice little garden with plenty of storage. This was the garden originally with a garage, and it had a load more trees in front of it, and the trees were growing up the side of the front of the garage and going underneath the roof and causing leaks into the garage. So while I was fixing up the garage, which you'll see in some of my previous videos, which I'm still in the process of doing, I had to cut the trees down because they were creating the leaks in the roof. So I thought, if I'm cutting the trees down, I might as well put a concrete slab in front of it, which you can see I've done here. I did it in 2 sections, and then I created this block here because I want to put a punch bag on there basically. And I've got a special crane. It was basically, I think it's a handmade crane from Sheffield, but I have no idea what it was handmade for or specifically designed for. All I know is I took it off a job where I had to collect a load of rubbish. That was part of it. So I'm basically using it as a crane to hold a punch bag. So while I put the concrete slab down, I thought, well, let's go the whole hog and put double doors in. That was fairly easy. I got help from my uncle, who is a builder, and basically we cut out the window, knocked it down, put some I think it's called RSJs in England, not too sure what it's called in the rest of the world, just to hold up the front of the garage while we put in the big beam on the front of the doors. And we end up using the bricks from that wall to put as hardcore for the rest of the build, which was pretty good. Now the side of my garden was also full of trees, and I don't have a photo of the trees before, so I've only got a photo of it halfway, but basically the whole side of my garden was full of trees and bushes, so I cut them all down, dragged them all out, and started digging all the roots out. That was a big process, and that took quite a long time. All in all, this project took about a year to complete. The whole garden took about a year to complete. Now bear in mind, we were only working after work and at weekends and stuff, and the people working and helping me were basically people that work for me, doing the rubbish removals and the pest control and stuff that I also do. Say that we only had half a day's worth of rubbish clearance work, we would then go into my garden and start digging up some soil or doing something. But yeah, it took about a year to complete, maybe a little bit more actually, but again, we're only doing it at weekends and after work and stuff. And one major thing we did, because again, we're not really builders. My uncle is a builder, but he was sort of in and out and wasn't helping me too much, was we dug the foundations too deep. So we dug out so much earth, we probably took about 5 tons of earth out. And because it dug so much earth out, we then had to put a lot of hardcore back in, which is quite lucky because I do rubbish removals. I end up getting, as you can see here, tiles, bricks, little bit slabs of concrete, stuff like that. So it wasn't too bad filling it all back in again. And the more hardcore I put in, the less cement and sand I'd have to put in, which I have to pay for. We end up getting a whacker plate, hiring it from HSS just to whack it all down to make sure that it wasn't going to sink on us. But the good thing about having this concrete slab so thick with hardcore and cement is basically you could drive a truck over it and it ain't going to crack. And that was one of my major fears, was it actually cracking after a year or two, and having grass and weeds coming through the cracks. I ended up using quite a lot of sand and cement, much more than you can actually see in the video here and the photos here. End up being quite a lot anyway. It's quite a big project, and I wouldn't recommend doing it without having your own cement mixer. I had one, so I was quite lucky. If you were hiring it and doing a job this size, I mean, you'd have to do the whole job within a weekend really to get the cement mixer back to the hire company. But the way I did it was, I basically was, because I was doing it on weekends and afternoons and stuff after work, I was putting the cement down in blobs and patches, doing a couple hours here and there and building the layers up as I went along. And then I spent one weekend, me, my uncle, and one of the workers called Jimek, we spent a whole weekend basically getting everything ready for the final layer, and then on the Sunday, the final layer, we did the whole thing in one go. The floor is not actually completely level. It's got like, I think it's a 5-degree slant to one side, so the water will basically roll off to the right, so you won't have any standing water on the actual cement itself. I also end up making a bridge as well, so we could kneel on it or stand on it if we needed to get into places. But as you can see, it turned out alright. In some places it's better than others. We started at the big end and worked our way down towards the house, and by the time we got down towards the house we got into the rhythm of it, and it came out much nicer and much smoother. Where at the beginning, on the bigger, wider part, you can see it is a bit slightly patchy. But that's not too bad because it gives it a little bit of texture, and that's around where the punch bag is going to be, or is now. So the texture will help prevent from slipping and stuff when I'm actually using the punch bag. And then we end up having a lot more cement left over. Well, I don't say a lot more, but we had some left over. So basically we went through the garage to the alleyway, and we basically poured a load over the alleyway, because the alleyway is just mud, leaves and dirt. And cars can get stuck in it. So now there's a layer of cement on it. It helps the cars as they go in and out the alleyway. Then I decided to build a couple sheds, couple storage sheds. One for equipment for work, and one for gardening equipment for the garden, and also maybe for work as well. I looked at buying sheds, but they seem very expensive. I already bought one metal shed, as you can see in the video, and I bought that originally to store things in while I was actually doing the garden. But I ended up keeping it because it was expensive and took forever to build that shed. Now, with the wooden sheds, I looked online and looked in other shops and stuff, and I couldn't get what I wanted. I couldn't get the specific shape I wanted, the look I wanted, and they were really expensive. So I decided to make my own sheds. I used the wrong materials, so I'll start out saying this now. I used the wrong materials. I used the wrong wood. I was using basically non-treated wood because it was cheaper, and I thought I could treat it myself, paint it, and then use like varnishes over it, and that'd prevent the wood from rotting from the water. It didn't quite work out, and I got some of the wood bowing from absorbing some water, so the wood started to bow and stuff, especially this cladding wood. That bowed quite a lot, but I have fixed that, and what I've basically gone over with it now is epoxy resin paint basically, but it's epoxy and that stuff is watertight. I mean, nothing gets in it. So as you can see, I've got some warping in some of the woods where it warped out, but all in all the sheds turned out pretty decent. I mean, the garden's been finished for 2 years, and these sheds have been up in the rain for 2 years now. They've held up quite well. I also decided to make the roof with that clear perspex stuff. You get in, it's not perspex, but it's like clear plastic roof. You get it from B&Q. It's quite expensive. It's £70 a sheet, and you needed 2 sheets for both sheds. But I liked using it because when you open up a shed, it's dark. It's always dark and dingy, and you can never see anything in there. But now with the sheets, you can see everything that's in the sheds, which is pretty cool. The only downside is in the summer it gets really hot in those sheds. I mean, really hot. So I might actually cut out some air vents on either side of both sheds and let the air flow through the whole thing, just to keep it cool a little bit. But apart from that, yeah, the garden turned out pretty well. Again, it took just over a year to complete. We were quite lucky because we have rubbish trucks, so we can remove the earth quite cheaply. But again, yeah, for us it cost about £2,000. And I probably wouldn't recommend doing it yourself either. This is one of the projects I think I bit off more than I could chew, and I just managed to do it. So yeah, so that was the garden. I'm afraid I don't have any good after photos. I laid the turf down, so we bought some turf and laid the turf down. I don't have any good photos though, which is I'm kind of bummed out about, because the garden's a bit of a mess at the moment, and I do not want to spend a whole weekend just to get a photo for a YouTube video. Now it does need cleaning up, but I've got more important things to do at the moment. But you can see what I've gone for and seeing how I've sort of done it. But yeah, this is how I've done it. It might not be the correct way to do it, or the best way to do it, but it's the way I've done it. Again, I'm not a builder, so hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. Anyway, thank you for watching, and please subscribe.